We've seen how the brain builds this intricate map of the world. But once that map is constantly being updated, what happens? It's not just about static representation anymore. The real action kicks in when these sensory signals become the primary job description. Keep the internal model fresh, keep the organism oriented. Think of it like a GPS constantly recalculating based on new data. Suddenly, the way we classify these incoming signals isn't just for one specific task, like recognizing a predator. No, it becomes general. Any signal, depending on where it lands in the grand scheme of things, can potentially nudge any response. These classified signals aren't just data points. They're becoming symbols, little flags saying, this means X, and here's what it implies for what we might do next. Now picture this neural tapestry. It's never static, it's a swirling, dynamic mess of activity. So, how does anything make sense of it? How do we get meaning? Not from the signals themselves necessarily, but from their connections. Each little neural spark doesn't exist in isolation. Its significance comes from the fact that it tends to trigger other sparks. It's like dominoes falling, but with a twist. Every signal starts a chain reaction, a cascade of associated thoughts or impulses. And these aren't random chains. They're echoes of past experiences. Things the system has learned are linked together. If every single chain just ran wild, we'd be lost in a fog of possibilities, unable to grasp the actual situation. Instead, this whole configuration acts like a compass, pointing not just at where we are, but also at where we might be going. It represents the now and the potential next steps. Okay, let's bust a common myth right here. Forget the old idea that one neuron firing equals one specific feeling or thought. It's way more complex than that. The quality of a mental state, the what it feels like part, isn't inherent in the neuron itself. It's earned through association. A neuron gets its unique flavor, its place in the mental landscape, because it reliably triggers a whole suite of other neurons. The sequence of thoughts or feelings you experience. That's not just one signal passing to the next. It's the result of a massive complex dance between countless overlapping streams of impulses. Even the simplest thought transition, like moving from blue to red, is probably the net result of a whole crowd of underlying processes converging. Some signals get the spotlight, forming the main event, while others contribute to the background hum, shaping the overall scene even if they don't steal the show. So, when we talk about conscious thoughts flashing by, what determines the next thought? It's not just the current conscious idea. What follows depends heavily on the unconscious background noise, the stuff happening beneath the surface. Think of it like this. A conscious thought is like a bright spotlight on a stage, but the actors' movements and the set dressing behind them, the unconscious processes are crucial for the play to make sense. This distinction between conscious and unconscious isn't fundamentally different from the difference we see higher up in the processing hierarchy, between the fully worked out conclusions and the fuzzier, less defined ideas feeding into them. Always, the effect of something depends not just on what's front and center, but on the whole context, the less differentiated background it sits upon. Now, life isn't always neat and tidy. Sometimes the associations triggered by a situation aren't all pointing in the same direction. They can clash, they can contradict each other. Imagine trying to simultaneously reach for two objects in the exact same spot, or wanting something to be both hot and cold at once. These conflicting impulses, these incompatible desires, can't all happen. If every possible path forward was equally valid, the initial signal would just scatter off into chaos. So, there must be a selection mechanism. It's like a traffic cop for thoughts. Where different impulse streams overlap and reinforce each other, they get amplified, pushing towards a coherent outcome. But where they diverge or actively fight each other, they cancel each other out. This filtering process is essential for making sense of the world and acting effectively. So, what does this selected configuration actually do? It's not just a passive mirror of reality. It's an active predictor. This internal model constantly tries to guess what's going to happen next based on the current situation. It's like having a crystal ball, albeit a slightly flawed one. Of course, reality keeps checking this prediction against the ground truth, via new sensory input. But at the same time, New information is always filtered through the lens of these existing expectations. It's a constant dialogue between the model and reality. Crucially, the mental representations guiding behavior aren't just about what is now. They include what is expected to be next. The organism is essentially running simulations, testing out potential actions and their likely consequences before committing to anything. It's a built-in what-if machine. This predictive modeling isn't just some fancy stuff reserved for conscious thought. Similar associative processes are likely humming along preconsciously, classifying situations and anticipating outcomes, even without us being aware. The key insight here is that the brain's model of the world isn't just a copy. It's a representation of probabilities, of likely futures, much like the real world operates probabilistically. You can't really separate the what is from the what might be. The organism lives in a dual reality, the facts on the ground and its own world of expectations. Many of our responses, especially the clever adaptive ones, are figured out through this internal model testing different scenarios. These symbolic chains of thought, representing expected consequences, are the physiological basis for understanding complex behaviors and even explaining those delays between stimulus and response, even when we're not consciously aware of the trigger. All right, let's talk about a potential paradox. The way neurons fire, the transmission of impulses in the central nervous system, could easily be described as purely mechanical, like clockwork. But hold on. The overall behavior resulting from this neural machinery is anything but mechanical. It's flexible, adaptable, seemingly goal-directed. So, what makes it different? Let's define mechanical. Think of a simple machine like a gear train. It has a fixed structure, performs the same function every time given the same input, repeats itself, and can only do a limited number of things. It's passive, reacting to the outside world. Our neural system, it's the opposite. It constantly changes its wiring based on experience, learns entirely new tricks, and its actions look remarkably intentional. It's active, driven by both its internal state and external inputs. It's not just reacting, it's engaging with the world. Why does this system seem so intentional? Because it's shaped by its entire history. The same set of stimuli rarely triggers the exact same response twice. Why? Because the internal state, the pre-existing neural patterns have changed. New behaviors emerge not because individual motor commands are novel, but because they combine in new ways. Think of basic movement commands like speed up, turn left, avoid obstacle. Specific actions arise from the blend of these general directives. And the driving force, that internal model we talked about. It predicts outcomes. When a predicted outcome aligns with a current need or desire, an urge, an appetite, that's when intentionality kicks in. The model guides the organism towards actions that lead to that desired result. This desired outcome isn't just a passive possibility. It's reinforced by both the environmental cues suggesting it's achievable and the internal drive making it attractive. It gets louder in the neural noise, pushing behavior forward. Okay, so the model flags a desired outcome. Great. But often, there's not just one way to get there. Maybe several actions have historically led to that goal. Or maybe there are multiple goals that are all desirable right now. How does the system pick one? Just because an action is linked to a past success doesn't mean it's the right move now. Obstacles, changing conditions, competing needs all complicate things. We need another layer of selection. First, we need to eliminate the clearly stupid options. Like, if the model represents needing food and needing water, but the environment only allows for one, the conflicting impulses representing both needs will cancel each other out. But what about when multiple paths seem viable? How does the system choose between them? The choice isn't just about the final destination. The journey matters too. Different actions, different intermediate steps, carry their own weight. Some actions feel good, others feel bad, require effort, maybe even pain. The mere thought of exertion often carries a negative charge, unless the payoff is huge. It's like choosing routes on a map. You might know two roads lead to Rome, but one is a scenic highway, the other is a bumpy dirt track through a swamp. The interplay of all these factors, the desirability of the goal, the unpleasantness of the effort, maybe even small rewards along the way, leads to a natural selection. The system tends to favor the path of least resistance. Actions that are overly painful or inefficient, even if they could technically achieve the goal, get discarded. It's a pragmatic optimization. Does this all sound a bit too human-like? Can intentionality truly exist without consciousness? Look around. We already have machines that exhibit clear signs of intentional behavior, like anti-aircraft gun predictors or autopilots. They operate based on models, predicting outcomes and adjusting actions accordingly. Now they're relatively primitive compared to a brain, limited in scope, and crucially, they can't learn from experience. But the point is, they demonstrate intentionality in principle. They differ from a brain not in kind, but merely in degree of complexity and adaptability. This strongly suggests that intentionality doesn't require a rich, conscious mental life. Much simpler systems, following similar principles of modeling and prediction, can show goal-directed behavior. Once you reach the level of complexity seen in the brain's mental order, intentionality isn't some new magic trick. It's a natural consequence of the underlying mechanisms. Let's try to visualize this model-object relationship using a thought experiment, a kind of supermodel. Imagine a universe made purely of particles. Forget colors or shapes. These particles are different solely by how they interact with others. No subjective qualities, just objective relationships. The point isn't to create a model made by a mind, but to show how a part of the universe could contain a representation of the whole universe, enabling survival. Picture a self-contained cosmos where particles interact based on rules. Let's assume we have Laplace's demon knowledge. We know every interaction rule perfectly. Particles of the same type are interchangeable. Swapping one for another wouldn't change the outcome. This sets the stage for understanding how structures within this system could represent aspects of the whole. Within this particle universe, particles can link up to form structures. Some structures are stable, lasting longer, others are fragile. Stability just means the probability of surviving interactions with the environment. The more complex a structure, the more ways it can be broken, and the more specific the conditions needed for it to persist. Think of a snowflake versus a pile of sand. The snowflake is delicate, needs specific cold, dry conditions. The sand pile is tougher, survives more varied conditions. Some structures survive not by being indestructible, but by dodging threats. A mercury droplet rolls us away from danger, a leaf twists to minimize wind resistance. There's no foresight, just physics. But for more complex structures facing uncertain environments, mere dodging isn't enough. They need to anticipate trouble, responding appropriately to warning signs as they appear. How can a structure learn to respond appropriately? By developing memory. If a structure consistently survives by reacting to certain environmental cues that precede danger, it can learn this pattern. It retains a memory of the connection between the cue and the needed response. This learning dramatically increases its chances of persistence. Predicting the future rarely relies on a single snapshot. It usually involves recognizing patterns in combinations of current events. Any system that responds differently based on these combinations must internally represent those relationships. This internal representation, this map of how external events relate to each other, is the model. Now, imagine trying to learn responses to every single possible combination of events. It would be computationally nightmarish. The trick is classification. Classification is the secret sauce. Instead of learning that event A1 plus B1 plus CC1 equals X, and A1 plus B1 plus C2 equals X, and so on for thousands of combinations, the system learns that class A plus class B plus class C equals X. Once it knows that any member of class A, any member of class B, and any member of class C together produce X, it can predict the outcome for all the underlying individual combinations. This is massively efficient. The classification apparatus, our mental map, isn't really a picture of the world. It's more like an inventory of types of things, and a theory of how they interact. Think of it as a meccano, a kit of parts, allowing the system to build specific models for specific situations quickly. Of course, this model has limits. It can only approximate reality. Its success hinges on the fact that the universe often allows us to isolate relatively independent chunks of complexity that can be modeled reasonably well. So, where does consciousness fit into all this? We've been talking about this mental order, this qualitative classification of events, distinct from the physical order. This mental sphere is vast, encompassing far more than just conscious experience. It includes the sophisticated processing in simple animals, and even many bodily responses in humans that occur unconsciously. This definition opens the door to discussing the mental order even from a behaviorist standpoint. Up until now, we've focused on the general nature of this mental ordering, whether conscious or not. Now we'll start to zoom in specifically on the phenomenon of consciousness itself.